Welcome to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes Ministries. Thank you for listening. Janet will be talking about her struggle with addiction, alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, unwanted same-sex attraction, and living a homosexual life. Janet has survived all those things by the grace of God. Janet's not a doctor, she's not a therapist, she's not a psychotherapist, she's not a licensed counselor. Janet is an ordained pastor and wants to show you God's promises, how God has set her free, and how you can be set free. What He has done for her, He will do it for you. If healing and freedom are what you want, you have come to the right place at the right time. Let's get started. Here is Janet Boynes.
I want you to know I am so excited about this podcast. I want to welcome Dr. Gillies. Welcome to Healing and Made Free.
Wonderful to be here.
Let me just read a quick excerpt that I saw on with your book. Dr. Gillies is a retired trauma-informed therapist who has spent many years researching the exploding cross-sex identifying phenomena.
Absolutely. And it's exploded to the point where people are finally waking up.
Well, that is a mouthful. You know, as somebody who lived that life for 14 years and been out over 20 and get to travel the country and speak on this issue, you wrote your first book, What Happened to Emily?
My first children's book.
Your first children's book. Why that title? I was intrigued by that.
Oh, well, it's interesting. You know how you just know that you're to write something? And I've never written a children's book. And I wanted to write something on the whole perspective of why children and adolescents are choosing to transition, as it's called. And I thought, well, I want to do this for children. So Whatever Happened to Emily is talking about her experience. Two children. It starts when they're 4 years old. Two little girls become friends. And so the book is tracking their early childhood up to about age 14. Mm-hmm. And that's it was Whatever Happened to Emily. The name, I wasn't sure I was still going to use it after the first draft. I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll change it. But I never got to change it because it just seemed to fit as the book went along, because it's really what we need to understand what is happening to these children. And Emily really is, in my estimation, is a really good example of the psychological and the trauma pieces that go into the mindset. And it includes the education system. There's a little bit of everything that's really influencing these children.
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head, because that is the question. What happened to so-and-so? How did that happen to so-and-so? Yes. When I read your excerpt, Dr. Gillies, it sounded like my story, because I was working at Control Data. I was sitting by myself. I was a Christian, minding my own business. I would just sit and read my Bible. One day, this girl came up to me and started sitting with me and talking with me and started spending time with me. And I started to be noticed by her. And she was whispering all these, nice things in my ear. I was engaged to get married. And we started spending a lot of time together. And then one night it happened 3 months before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. So the question to everybody was, what happened to Janet, or what happened to this person? I think it's a superb title. As you mentioned earlier, and I got it wrong, you have many books, but this is your first children's book. What's the premise of the story? You started out, but what is the premise behind this?
Well, the premise is this young girl who, is fairly well adjusted. She has parents, male and female parents, and she becomes a good friend to Hannah, the other girl in the story, who is also, fairly well adjusted. Everything looks good, right? These two children, and they become very good friends. And so the trajectory is that Emily goes through some traumatic events in her life, and her parents subsequently divorce. Her mother has some psychological issues, is hospitalized, and her sister also started her. She has an older sister in the book, and her sister starts talking about not liking boys after she broke up with her boyfriend, and she then decides she's a lesbian, which is typical. This is just typical trajectory now in families. It's so hard to imagine that this has come to this place, but it's so easily replicated. And so I kind of tried to base it on that. So the older sister really started the ball rolling. And then with the trauma that Emily experiences, that added to it. And then, of course, teachers and the education system and her peers, all talking about, well, maybe you're in the wrong body, those kind of things. So I think you're right. I think the title probably was very, I think it's inspired and divinely inspired. And I think it does answer some of that questions. This book will become a series. I want to continue with Emily.
I think it's a wonderful series, and I think it's well needed. For me, is what is like, why reinvent the wheel? If somebody's coming out with children's books that's going to impact families, because we're always getting emails on, do you have books for children? That's what interests me. When I got this, is like, oh my gosh, finally somebody's writing books for children. I have written a children's book, but never felt in my heart I was supposed to release it. And it's still sitting there ready to go, but I have not released this. I think you said something that is really important. You mentioned that Emily went through, or Hannah went through some trauma.
No, Emily, you've got
Emily
it right.
went through some trauma with a guy. And I'm hearing that from many women. They are going through this trauma. They're going through a breakup. They were cheated on. They were abused. Not that all men are like that, which I agree, or not all women are like that. But then they decide, I don't want to do this. Maybe a woman will treat me better. But you have to look at what are they really dealing with? Did they have a really good relationship with their mother growing up? Are they looking for something in another woman that they didn't get from mom growing up? Can you speak on that? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Well, and so this was Emily's sister, first of all, that broke up with her boyfriend, and that had a huge impact. And these are things that happen now because everything is so full of suggestion in our education system and in society in general. So, and there is this whole aspect of pushing out masculinity and pushing away men. And so I think that this is it's all what's happening currently. And so the sister gets her heart broken, and instead of understanding that this is part of teenage, experience, it does happen, she decides that she just hates men and would rather be with women. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. You're right. Problems with mom, and that is depicted in this story. And this isn't a beating up of parents. It's just a reality in these situations that there often is adverse childhood effects that have been going on. Trauma, sometimes sexual abuse. There wasn't that in this case. I didn't put that in. But, and this is a novel, remember, this is a children's novel, but based on a lot of understanding. So you're right. This is something that is happening. Young women are not encouraged. Of course, we know this. It's not about love anymore. It's all about sex. And it's not about encouraging young women to wait until marriage. Oh my goodness, that's like an archaic idea. It's not even about getting married. And there's no talk of that in the school system anymore when it comes to sex ed. It's talking only about pleasure, sexual pleasure. And you get that pleasure wherever you want to get it. So it's all about self-pleasing, which becomes a real problem, Janet, because we know that pleasure is just such a little piece. Sexual pleasure is such a little piece of life, and we all could live without it. Now, horror of horrors. Could you imagine that? I mean, it's not that you want to, but if push comes to shove, it's not an essential of life. It's a reproductive essential. Anyways, I can go on and on. I don't want to do that.
No, it's a novel, but a lot of truth to your novel that is happening in the world today. I always ask myself, why are we dealing with this issue with this era, with these millennials and Gen Zs? And I believe it had to be the Lord, because I'm not that smart to think of this. But if you go back to the beginning of time with Adam and Eve, even though God gave Adam directions, you notice that the woman wound up stepping in front of him and doing things and controlling situations that she wasn't meant to control. And then sin came into the world. And I think that has been a taboo for us, throughout history. Women always take charge. And if a woman takes charge, we notice our men will take a back seat to it instead of stepping up, not controlling women, but, saying, hey, God, there's order in the house. And I think that's why we're seeing so many problems. You got God, you got the husband, you got mom, and then you got the kids. But if you pull somebody from under that order that God put us in, you see all kinds of problems. But my question to you is, why do you think we're dealing with this right now in this era, even though I know we're in the end of the end times? And this is not a surprise to God at all.
Well, that goes back to my second book, called Closing the Floodgates, Setting the Record Straight on Gender and Sexuality. So I wrote that in 2016, and I talked about the 70 years of indoctrination and sexualization of our society. And so that kind of was the beginning. It goes back into the 1800s truthfully, but I thought, I better start in this century because people don't want to know ancient history too much. So I did that, started with the Kinsey Institute and all of that stuff. So it's got a lot of, that book has like 30 some pages, I think 38 pages of references. It's a very well-referenced book, and yet I tried to write it just for the general public, but it gives a lot of information on exactly why we are where we are at today. And at that time, I was saying to parents, you've got to unite. You have to stand up against this. And the whole transgender movement was really just fledgling at that point. It had been going on for a number of years, for decades, but the movement was only coming into its own at about that time. And since then, of course, it's exploded.
Yeah. Well, it has exploded in so many different ways. And as many people are transitioning, there's many people that are detransitioning. And the sad thing is, you talked earlier about the school district. You have parents that their kids walk around in their heels at the age of 3, and then they want to transition them and cut off their body parts. We know NEA, the National Education Association, already wants to, take the word parents and call them birthing parents. The transgender community are saying, why are we celebrating mothers and fathers? Why don't we just call it Parents' Day? What about us? What about us? What do you mean, what about you? We celebrate you for a full month. We have to deal with that issue for a season. And, you get to celebrate, Christmas, Christ one day, Thanksgiving or Memorial Day, Labor Day, and we get to deal with homosexuality for a full month. So it really drives me nuts when they talk about that. You can't even go into a bar, Dr. Gillies, until you're 21. You can't get your driver's license until you're 16, but they can cut off your body parts at the age of 3 through 6. That doesn't make any sense. Do you think that when this happens, which I'm seeing today, that a child can later in life realize, I made a mistake, you were my parents, why did you allow this to happen to me? And then go back and sue the doctors?
Well, it's happening. One thing I do want to say, in Canada, you can't cut off body parts that young, but we can start medicalizing these children and putting them on hormone puberty blockers and hormone therapy, which my next book, which is just finishing the editing stage is Ultimate Deceptions, the dangers of gender affirming care. It's for parents. Let me go back one more step. The reason I actually wrote Emily is because people kept saying to me, can you write us a children's book? We need a children's book. So that was because of Emily. Then I'm writing this other one, Ultimate Deception. I've written it because people have said at workshops and things when I speak, can you please write something to help us understand what's wrong with gender affirming care? Mm-hmm. So back to children actually being transitioned by, teachers, first of all, tell teachers who have no therapeutic education. They are not psychologists or psychiatrists.
Exactly.
Even they're not even social workers, and social workers can't diagnose anyways. And so, but teachers are diagnosing these children. They see a child wanting, a little boy wanting to play with the girls or vice versa. And now they are telling these children, literally telling them they are born in the wrong body, or perhaps or if they aren't telling them, they put the confusion in their minds by saying, perhaps you're a boy, perhaps you're a girl. And then that starts the process because it gets reinforced over and over and over. You think of these children, they're sitting every day, 6 hours a day in our schools, our public education system, and hearing over and over and over again, because the LGBT curriculum, sex ed curriculum, and I will call it LGBT activism curriculum, is integrated into every single course in one way or another. And that, you can't escape it. You can't escape it. I think I've forgotten your question.
That's okay. I think I mentioned something about the era, but I want to move on anyway, because you talked about parents asked you to write this book. One, so they can have a better understanding on how they deal with this issue, even though our books, talk about it as well. But can a child of any age read this book?
Yes. I think it's better if the parent helps them read if they're a 7-year-old, right? They can read it. It's actually, my husband read it. I was proud of him. He read my book. And I gave it to him and force-fed him. I said, anyways, he finished it and he said, wow, it's just like two little kids talking. And I went, yes. It's like that. It's kind of like Hannah and Emily having these dialogues. And so I think it's pretty readable. I really will have to hear some feedback from the children. But and I didn't end up getting my grandchildren to read it yet because it was such a fast process of getting it published. So I think it's very readable, but it's good to have parents kind of to talk to about it. I want the parents to be involved.
Yeah. I think it's always important. I'm not sure if you did this when writing a book, you send it out to those that will be reading the book. So you can have a better perspective or idea what they're thinking about the book, if there's something to be added. So it would be interesting to see, what somebody, a seventh grader, or eighth grader, or ninth grader, so forth and so on, would say about your book. One, I'm hoping you'll send me a copy. We were talking about the transgender, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but you can Google it. Or those of you that are listening, I'm talking with Dr. Gillies about her new book, children's book, What Happened to Emily. In Minnesota, they just passed the bill. It's called the Trans Refuge Bill, that you can go to Minneapolis, Minnesota, if your parents don't support your worldview, and they will take you under their wing and help transition you. I don't care what age. Once you get there, that can happen to you. So, when you talk about the school teachers and those that are supposed to protect us,
yes,
are doing more damage to us, such as your parents and counselors and teachers, and someday when they stand before the Lord, they will pay for this, because God made one man and one woman, and we cannot forget there's only two genders, not 50 or 60 of them.
two sexes. There are two
sexes. Two sexes, yes.
Gender is their terminology, is the LGBTQ. And so, there are two sexes. And what you were saying, that's also happened in Maine recently. These refuge states, and you're right, there's no age limit. Children can run away, and there used to be a time when children ran away and the police would take the child back to the home. And investigate. Is there a reason why this child's running away? What's going on? Or the child would simply come home because they were just having a hissy fit because, mom didn't want to let them go to a party or something. We had normalcy, basically. Now everything is very abnormal. And you're right. There's going to be a day of reckoning. I hope that has started. Actually, there is a new legal firm, and I can't remember the name of it, but they started their firm to represent detransitioners. So that's their specialization. So that tells me that there's a whole lot of lawsuits coming out.
Right.
And I'm hoping, so this is lawsuits against medical professionals. My hope is that the next group will be against educators, the public school system, because this is, it's all government, right? But it's so diabolical.
Dr. Gillies, it's you said, we talked about this earlier, that everybody is starting to wake up. Now that, with everything that happened with Target, everybody's doing pushback. You have the what is it? The Francis, Francis, somewhere in California, they were singing this song about "We're coming for your children." In New York at the Gay Pride, they were holding up banners. Yes, we're coming for your children. And I'm glad that people are starting to wake up, because if we don't wake up, our children will continue to go down that path. The enemy is after our families. They're out to divide. He's out to divide families. As you said earlier, I believe to get rid of men. As you see, many men are wanting to transition into women, go into our bathrooms and just take over our sports arena, which is really sad in and of itself. And me growing up, Dr. Gillies, being raised in a family of 7 kids with 4 different fathers, I was raped by my mother's husband. And found out later I had another sibling that was raped by the same man. We didn't know about each other. And then the man that raised me was an alcoholic. And we watched my mother get beat up quite a bit on the weekends. Yes, she tried to fight back, but she's just not as strong as a guy. You know what I mean? So I always saw my mother get abused and knocked down steps. And with that trauma I dealt with, I thought that's how you handle your problems. So my parents are cussing everybody out. Cussing each other out. They're fighting. So I went to school and I did the same thing, because I thought if somebody messes with me, you're supposed to beat them up. And one of my questions was, evidence seems to indicate that trauma, adverse childhood experiences, unstable family life can all impact decisions about sexuality. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And so we have a similar background. The book I wrote that came out in December is called Damaged by the Predators Among Us. And it's my personal family story. And certainly their damage that happens through those kind of traumatic events has lifelong repercussions. Even, and I'll say this, even for those of us who are believers, who are Christians, we still must deal with some of the trauma from our past. And that's my first book on deep impact. But anyways, being able to deal with those traumas and getting set free. And I think when you're talking about trauma, that's why this is so important with whatever happened to Emily, because when we understand how trauma impacts the brain and how new neural pathways end up getting strengthened of how you respond, right, to sexual advances and how you have to just cave to different things, then all of those things go in. They're all components that predispose us to certain types of behavior. And right now, cross-sex identifying has become more than a fad. I mean, goth was a fad, right? But this is the most dangerous adolescent fad, if you want to capture it like that, because it is promoted worldwide, and it is promoted. It's financially extremely productive to have these children that transitioning. So all of those things are all part of this, and I think while we hope most people are waking up, certainly all of them aren't, and it's like we have two sides. We have the parents who are still so blinded, and they're starting to awaken, and then we have those who are they've seen this coming for a while. And I guess there's a center side. Those are the ones who are promoting, the activists who are promoting drag story time in our schools and everything that goes along with what will, I believe, predispose children toward pedophilia.
Yeah. Yes. I just think there's more to come. Yes. Where they will allow that to happen to our children. The movie that just came out on, our children being molested and raped and kidnapped. And that movie, I'm not sure if you saw it, but it just tore my heart apart.
Is that Sound of Freedom?
Yes.
Yes.
Especially in the United States. It's like the largest place that this is happening. Neither here nor there. I want to bring something up because I think it's important. Many men and women that are detransitioning have been given a platform. And I said to many people, I know many people will come out of homosexuality, they'll tell their pastor, or they'll go on a, podcast or a radio show. And now everybody wants to give them a platform. And I think it's a disservice to them because they have not dealt with the problem. They got them there in the first place. And so we're seeing these young children, 21, 22, they have this ginormous platform. They have a publicist and they're speaking all over the country. But I think that this platform is helping them to medicate their pain. They haven't dealt with the real issues. Don't you think later it can cause them to possibly go back to where they were because they didn't deal with that inner problem? Now, I don't know if this is with everybody, but I don't think most of them are getting the help that they really need. Can you speak on that?
Well, I think you've got a really valid point. And I think, what's being promoted, this is novel, right? Because they are detransitioning. We knew this would happen at some point. But yes, putting young people, adolescents in the public eye, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for many reasons. Not only that, they're out there sharing their life stories, which is that's a most difficult thing, especially for a young person. So whether they go back into retransitioning or something else, most of them have not been helped in the deep underlying issues. And here's the issue that many of them are saying. They had all kinds of people, medical help to transition, but there is no medical help in the whole detransitioning.
Exactly.
And because in Canada, a Bill C4, we as therapists, and I'm retired now, but therapists and pastors, we dare to help someone that no longer wants to be transgender or cross-sex identifying, we are liable to 5 years in prison and $10,000 fine. Like a whole thing has been set up to actually annihilate our children.
So is anybody there in Canada, do they have, as my good friend Michelle Bachman would say, a titanium spine? I know people will say, well, you don't live in Canada. I'm sorry, I probably couldn't keep my mouth shut. I will have to speak up and stand up for righteousness, right standing with God, because I believe God can loosen the the doors and take the chains off and get us out of prison. Are there people there that are going to prison because they choose not to listen to the world's law?
So, two answers to this. First of all, no one's ever been charged. I'm waiting. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be charged, but I have spoken out because you can't even advertise any help or care.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in 2018, there were 4 women, one of them, that formed a group called Mama Bears, spelled UMMA Bears. And last night, it just didn't gain traction. People were not that interested. This is 2018. People are now interested. Last night, we did a podcast with Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson. She's one of us. And so your viewers may want to check that out. It's called Laura Lynn Live. And yes, we are activated. We've been behind the scenes for many years, and I've been speaking out for many years. But we are now activated and moving forward with Mama Bears. So to bring this into the mainstream, into a community, so we can talk to people. And so one of them is a pastor. One of them is the organizer of Operation Rise, the group we're all with. Laura Lynn is a podcaster who used to work with 700 Club, and then myself. So yes, and there are others. We're not the only ones, but we're probably the most vocal. Anyways, we want to energize and ignite mamas and papas. We have to stand.
I love that you said mamas and papas, because I have Gail, who runs my mom's group. She is a professional counselor, and specializes in EMDR, which I'm sure you know what that is, for trauma. And I'm actually going to introduce you to her, and I look forward to it because we try to keep it under 12 or 15 moms so everybody can have time to talk, et cetera, et cetera. But I think introducing this book to them, which it'd be great to have you speak with them so we can continue to get this book out, because I think it will impact parents to have a better understanding on what they're dealing with in the home. Because most parents look, I raised my child up in a Christian home, and I never thought this would happen. But just because we do train our child up, in the admiration of the Lord, it doesn't mean that the enemy won't try to pull them away. But I do believe our children will come back to the Lord, and maybe there's many that won't come back. But this thing is really pulling on the heartstrings of our children, because I believe our children are looking for a place to fit in. They're looking for a community. If they're rejected from one community, such as, the athletes or, the real pretty girls, and they're just being shunned and pushed, whether you're wearing all black, or you're a homosexual, they're going to go to these gay straight alliance group. They're looking for a place to fit in. If these are the people that are embrace them, love on them, that's the group they're going to join. And that's why I think in the church, we're doing a disservice when we see our children not coming together, and no matter what you look like, walk like, or talk like. We are God's children. We're going to spend eternity together. And it's sad that we're not teaching our children that right now here on planet Earth, that we should love everybody, regardless of their homosexuality. You can still love somebody and not support their ideology.
Yes.
We can still love people and not be transition or agree with their morals and their values. Speak on that, will you please?
Yes, I really believe the church needs to be activated in this. And I think one thing that you talked about was gay straight alliances and this whole issue. I believe children are being targeted, just like with sex trafficking. It's all connected. And many of these children are autistic. They have 3, and all of these children who later identify as transgender have between 3 and 5 pre-existing psychological issues that have been untreated. And so we have very vulnerable children looking for love and acceptance, just wanting to fit in. And I just think back to my childhood, and because I came out of a similar situation as yours, I was vulnerable. I was a loner. I didn't make friends easily because I couldn't have friends to my home. It was like okay, I can't do that. And I look now and think, and I was a tomboy.
Yeah.
and, I just didn't fit socially. And it was like, now it would be like, oh, there's got to be something going on. You fit in here. So you go to the Gay Straight Alliance, and these children do, and I've interviewed some of them, and they go to the Gay Straight Alliance where they will fit because they're socially outcast in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they decide, well, maybe, and then they get, usually they get coerced, they'll say that, or they're talked into, well, you should just try on social condition or social transitioning. You don't have to do anything drastic. Just start socially transitioning at school. Don't tell your parents, and school collude with you. They can go get changed in a cloakroom or something, and don't tell your parents, and just start doing it. But children who then go, wait a minute, I don't think this is me, and leave the group. Oh my goodness, it's like everything else. They are so ostracized. They are socially outcast again because these are not the love of love people. I know that that's their mantle, their motto. I hate that motto for them. I mean, because the sense of love is all love is equal. And that is such a lie. And we have children believing it and believing that they're going to be loved and cared for. But if they step out of line, man, they are done. You no longer exist to us. And my eldest son, he left a homosexual lifestyle after many, many years. And that's what he found. He had all these friends and nope, you're gone. That's it. And so it's very cult-like.
It's conditional for them, yes. Unless you join our group. Or stay with our group where you're going to be our friend. But as soon as you walk away, you're no longer our friend. And I said to a lot of gay people, can't we agree to disagree? We might not spend a lot of time together, but I can get to know you. I'm not going to go into the bars. I'm not going to go into all your settings. But if we don't accept them, we're called a bigot and, gay haters. And I mean, they love, more than we do. We're the haters and we're the devil and they're not. So, the enemy is using it to twist everything around. What God made for good, they're making it for evil. What's light is dark, what's dark is light. Dr. Gillies, we are coming to an end. But when parents read your book, What Happened to Emily, which I think is a beautiful, I love that title because that's our question. What happened to my child? What happened to this person or what happened to that? What happened on the inside where they raped, where they abused, where they teased? What do you want parents mainly to get out of this book by the time they're finished reading this book? What do you want them to get out of it?
I think number one is a deep empathy for these children. Mm-hmm. Really. Now, for parents who are already in the midst of a child transitioning, which is a book I'm also writing right now, learning to love your non-conforming child. And that looks like Jesus' love for every child. We're all non-conforming, right? So I want to instill empathy for these children. I want to be able to underline truth, real truth, the truth of what actually transpires for these children, and also a sense of hope, hope. Hey, we can learn together. We can grow together. And I really also want, I think in my dream, for parents really to rise up and parent their children. We have a generation of parents who are more interested in being their child's friend than being a parent. Parenting is difficult. It's a joy. It's exciting. These are your children are your children forever. The ups and downs, the good, the bad, the ugly. The parenting can be difficult. And sometimes it's just easier to go along with your child. But that's not parenting. That's not true parenting. You want to do what's best for your child. And that means sometimes you need to say no, and you need to express truth to them. And so this is part of the whole issue of truth, biological reality. So that's kind of some of the things I hope for parents to gain.
You know, and speaking truth, Dr. Gillies, to our children, many of them will say, if you don't accept my worldview, if you don't accept me, if you don't allow my boyfriend or my girlfriend to come over the house, if you don't allow us to sleep in the same bed, I'm going to commit suicide. So many parents are afraid that their child is going to commit suicide. I know that's probably a whole nother podcast, but take the time to talk with the parents before we end this podcast. And also at the end of that, will you please let people know where they can reach out to you, where they can get your book? But speak into that mainly, because that's a big fear for parents around the country.
It's a huge fear, and it's a fear that's really promoted through activism now with the transgender individuals. First of all, if your child is telling you that they want to kill themselves, you need to get to the bottom of that. You know, you need to find a good therapist for your child. This is more than just about this issue. Now, I want to say something very specific. Social media, places like Reddit and Tumblr and even TikTok, and other places, and certainly doctors and psychologists who promote gender-affirming care will literally tell parents that, do you want a dead son or a live daughter?
Mm-hmm.
So they instill this tremendous fear. Well, what parent would say, I want my child to be alive? So the threat is there. But I want to say to you, parents, that is not true. In Tavistock Clinic, it was 0.03% of all of their gender disordered children committed suicide. Now, that's even too much, but it's not 20%. There are things to do. Get your child good psychological care to help with what is creating the suicidal ideation, because that's where the underlying mental health issues are. Everyone who has been traumatized, I mean deeply traumatized, I shouldn't say everyone, that's too broad, but the vast majority have suicidal ideation at one point or another. Trauma does that. Mm-hmm. So deal with the trauma.
Dr. Gillies, how can people reach out to you? Where can they get your book? What Happened to Emily?
It's available on Amazon and .ca, .com, Amazon.com in the US. Also, they can reach out to me at restoringthemosaic.ca or my email address, which is restoring.themosaic@gmail.com.
Dr. Gillies, thank you so much for being on Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes. Families, you have asked me many times to write a book for families regarding our children. Well, I don't think I need to reinvent the wheel. Dr. Gillies have already written a book. What's happened to Emily? That's your question. What happened to my child? Get this book. I think you'll be very happy with it. You don't have to compromise your morals and your values to love your child or to love anybody for that matter. Until next time, God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes. Acts 10:34 says, God is no respecter of persons. God doesn't play favorites, which means what he has done for Janet, what he has done for guests on this show, he will do for you too. If you are struggling with anything, do not hesitate to reach out to Janet Boynes Ministries. They will do their best to help you any way they can. Go to the website, janetboynesministries.com. Janet loves you, and most importantly, God loves you. Have a blessed day.